At 0612 hours local time, the stillness of the Gulf of Aden was broken not by storm or accident, but by intention. Hovering 800 feet above the restless blue-gray sea, a U.S. Navy MH-60R Seahawk, callsign Saber 71, maintained its racetrack pattern, eyes in the sky for anything out of place. Below, the Liberian-flagged tanker Endeavour Spirit pushed through the chop of one of the most volatile maritime corridors on Earth, flanked by the guided missile destroyer USS Mason DDG-87. From afar, it looked routine, another protective escort through dangerous waters. Until it wasn't. Off the tanker's starboard bow, one small skiff broke formation from a cluster of fishing vessels. At first glance, it looked like any other local boat. Low profile, fiberglass hull, 5 men on board. But then it happened. 2 men stood. One raised what looked like a PKM belt-fed machine gun, its familiar silhouette unmistakable in Saber 71's optics. Another man pulled a long black tube from a crate, an RPG-7, the pirate's signature weapon of escalation, and then fire. Muzzle flashes erupted from the skiff. Tracers from AK-47s arced skyward, bright yellow-orange streaks slicing through the morning haze. The rounds weren't aimed well, but they were fired with intent. One round ricocheted off Saber 71's left sponson, bouncing harmlessly into the sky. No injuries, no damage. But the message was unmistakable. They had just fired on a United States Navy helicopter, a very bad decision. Without delay, Saber 71's pilot banked hard right, climbing to altitude in a sweeping, evasive maneuver. Countermeasure flares punched out in blinding white bursts, standard protocol against a potential heat seeker. Inside the cockpit, the comms lit up. Hostile fire detected. Saber 71 tomando evasivas. Request ROE clarification. Back aboard the USS Mason, the Combat Information Center had been listening. Calm, professional, and fast. Hostile act confirmed. Proportional response authorized. The green light was given. Down below, the skiff tried to flee, but it was already too late. Saber 71's door gunner swung the M240B machine gun into position and laid down a tight, disciplined burst across the skiff's bow. 7.62mm NATO rounds churned the sea into white spray, close enough to rattle the crew and sting their faces with salt and steel. 1 pirate scrambled for cover, 2 dropped their weapons. The RPG vanished, tossed, or jammed, hard to tell. The skiff's engine cut. They were done. This is Saber 71. Hostile fire confirmed. 1 RPG, small arms discharge. Skiff is stationary, awaiting surface response. USS Mason didn't waste a second. 2 RHIBs rigid hull inflatable boats were lowered into the water. Each carried a VBSS team, sailors armed and trained for close quarters maritime operations. At the same time, a second Seahawk, Lancer 72, lifted off from the destroyer's flight deck and accelerated into the sky to provide overwatch and cover. This wasn't a firefight anymore. This was containment. Back on Saber 71, the FLIR forward-looking infrared sensor locked onto the skiff. 5 heat signatures, no weapons visible. The radar scanned wide, ensuring this wasn't part of a broader ambush. The tactical picture was clear. Time to move in. The RHIBs approached from opposite angles, forming a pincer maneuver, bows bouncing over the waves, M4s leveled and ready. From the lead RHIB, a bullhorn cracked the air. Drop all weapons. Remain seated. Do not move. The pirates complied. There was no fight left. The boarding party surged onto the skiff. AK-47s recovered. An RPG tube found under a tarp. Multiple GPS units, radios, and handheld satellite phones, still active, still linked to civilian frequencies. The skiff was searched bow to stern. No hidden compartments, no explosives. But this wasn't their first time, and likely not their last. Back aboard the Mason, the pirates were zip-tied, searched, and secured under armed watch. The gear they carried wasn't improvised. It was methodical, evidence of coordination. But there were no high fives, no celebration, only quiet execution of protocol, because everyone on that destroyer knew the truth. This wasn't just an attack, it was a test. What these pirates got wrong. They thought they were harassing a soft target. They mistook the Seahawk for a harmless surveillance craft. They misread the U.S. Navy's patience for weakness. They guessed, and they guessed wrong. Because Saber 71 isn't just a camera on rotors, it's a fully integrated combat platform, a multi-mission helicopter with the power to gather, strike, and coordinate faster than the enemy can react. Let's break it down. M240B door guns, both sides. 650 rounds per minute, precision suppression from the air. 4 AGM-114. Hellfire missiles under the wings, laser-guided, tank-killing, and designed to end a fight before it begins. FLIR targeting that detects heat through total darkness, turning a human with a weapon into a glowing target on screen. ASA radar dome underneath, capable of tracking surface contacts 20 nautical miles away, be it a sea-skimming missile or a drifting skiff. Data link connectivity with its mothership destroyer, real-time tactical integration, nothing delayed. This is what modern naval air power looks like. And these pirates? They brought Type 56 knockoff AKs, an RPG with a 30-year-old warhead, and boldness backed by ignorance. That's the formula that works against unarmed cargo ships, but not against Saber 71, not against the USS Mason. Why this matters? The Gulf of Aden may only span 500 kilometers, but it's one of the most critical maritime arteries on the planet. It connects the Arabian Sea to the Suez Canal, forming a choke point through which nearly 10% of global trade passes. Every day, you'll find oil tankers, LNG carriers, and container ships inching through this corridor, slow-moving giants, minimally manned, and often unarmed. For pirates, they're floating gold mines, easy to board, hard to defend, and worth millions. That's why the international community takes it seriously. Over 30 nations, including the United States, China, India, France, Japan, and even Russia, rotate forces through Combined Task Force 151, a multinational naval coalition focused solely on anti-piracy and maritime security. But this isn't just about robbery, it's about strategy. These pirate skiffs aren't always out to hijack. They're often probing, testing Navy response times, pushing the limits of the rules of engagement, and mapping the invisible lines where presence becomes action. Today was one of those tests. A skiff targeted a U.S. Navy helicopter with small arms and an RPG. Not a bluff, not an accident. And the U.S. Navy didn't flinch. They responded with clarity, speed, and restraint, sending a signal loud enough to echo far beyond that morning horizon. How the Navy responds. The U.S. Navy doesn't wait to react. Its approach to piracy is layered, preemptive, and designed to overwhelm threats with real-time domain awareness. Every step is deliberate. Every asset has a job, and every inch of ocean near a convoy is being watched by air, sea, and spectrum. 1. Airborne patrols. Eyes forward. Helicopters like Saber 71 and MH-60R Seahawk operate well ahead of their mothership, flying racetrack patrol patterns dozens of miles in front of the convoy. These aren't just eyes in the sky. They're fully equipped scout platforms with FLIR, forward-looking infrared, to track heat signatures at night, surface search radar to paint a full maritime picture. Link 16 data relays, feeding all visuals and telemetry directly to the destroyer's CIC, Combat Information Center. A change in engine heat. A course deviation. A fishing boat riding low in the water, maybe too low for what it claims to be. The helo spots it, flags it, track it, before the threat ever sees the convoy. 2. Surveillance drones. Persistent eyes. For every helicopter rotation, there's a drone overhead that doesn't blink. Systems like the MQ-8B Fire Scout and Scan Eagle patrol silently for up to 24 hours, giving commanders non-stop overwatch across a 50 to 100 kilometer radius. They use EO/IR cameras for close-in tracking synthetic aperture radar to detect small boats beyond line of sight. AIS, Automatic Identification System, spoof detection for vessels concealing their identity. They don't just watch, they record, timestamp, geotag, and feed intel into AI-assisted threat detection software aboard the destroyer. When seconds matter, that kind of awareness isn't luxury, it's survival. 3. Electronic detection. The digital battlefield. Forget what the boat looks like. What's it emitting? Navy destroyers are floating signal intelligence platforms, scanning the electromagnetic spectrum around the clock. VHF, UHF radio chatter, GPS and SATCOM pulses, sudden Wi-Fi bursts, or encrypted handshakes. These signals tell stories. A burner phone calling a known pirate frequency. A GPS device matching a path previously used in a hijacking. A sudden comms blackout that lines up with a false distress signal. That's not random. That's pre-attack prep, and the Navy sees it coming. 4. Surface interdiction. Boots on wake. Once a vessel is deemed a threat, the VBSS teams visit, board, search, seizure, move. RHIBs, rigid hull inflatable boats, scream off the side of the destroyer, loaded with sailors trained in maritime boarding tactics, close quarters combat, non-lethal escalation procedures, tactical intelligence gathering. They carry M4s, sidearms, breaching tools, and even less lethal grenades when the goal is capture over conflict. Their mission: get in fast, gain control, neutralize the threat. These aren't Coast Guard boardings. They're combat insertions, and every second on that skiff is a calculated risk. 5. Escalation assets. The big stick. But what if the skiff's just the tip of the spear? What if there's a mothership or a shore-based command center feeding intel to multiple pirate teams? Then you escalate, and escalate hard. That's when carrier-based F/A-18 Super Hornets enter the picture, armed with a GM-65, Maverick missiles for precision strikes, JDAMs, Joint Direct Attack Munitions, to crater pirate depots, long-range fuel pods for endurance over the sea. In under 15 minutes, the Navy can launch jets to strike pirate launch points, destroy weapons caches, disable radar and comms on land. No warning shots, no speeches, just one clean hit, and radio silence on the other end. The bigger picture. This entire chain, from drone feed to VBSS boarding to Super Hornet strikes, isn't improvisation, it's doctrine, developed over decades of counterinsurgency and asymmetric warfare across the Gulf of Aden, the Strait of Hormuz, the South China Sea, and the Caribbean trafficking lanes. It's a reminder to any hostile actor: if you test the US Navy, you're not just facing a ship, you're facing an integrated kill chain, one that begins before you even see the hull on the horizon. Epilogue. Back on USS Mason, the 5 detainees sat zip-tied on the deck, staring at nothing. Their weapons were tagged and bagged. Their GPS devices, radios, and satellite phones were already being logged, encrypted, and prepped for CENTCOM intel analysis. Every call they made, every route they plotted, every contact saved in those devices, now part of a growing database used to map pirate networks operating across Somalia, Yemen, and the broader Horn of Africa. Because it was never just about 5 men in a skiff. It's about the financial and logistical web behind them. The buyers, the suppliers, the lookouts, the digital footprints. Today's contact may be low-tech, but the intelligence gathered is pure gold. And while no US forces were harmed, and the threat was neutralized with minimal force, everyone aboard the Mason knew one thing. This was a warning shot, not from the pirates, but from us. A reminder that even in a lawless stretch of sea, there is order. And that order has teeth. Reality check. Every US Navy carrier strike group moves with a bubble of layered security, from airborne overwatch to electronic warfare, from surface patrols to standby jets. But the real workhorses of these piracy zones? Destroyers and cruisers like USS Mason, escort vessels built to see first, act fast, and strike smart. What happened this morning wasn't luck, it was doctrine, it was muscle memory. It was the result of decades of joint training, billions in integrated systems, and the professionalism of sailors who expect things to go wrong, and train accordingly. The pirates didn't know what they were pointing their weapons at, but they found out, the hard way. Now over to you. Or risk escalating fragile situations into full-blown firefights. We want your thoughts. Drop a comment below. This isn't just entertainment, it's a conversation that matters. And if you've made it this far, You're not just a viewer. You're one of the sharp ones.